So we are at a very critical stage of the investigation right now. There have been negotiations for months between the president's lawyers and Mueller's team about the scope and conditions and terms of any possible interview. There's been no agreement set. And so it is interesting that these questions are coming out and being provided to the New York Times at the moment that they are. One thing that is notable about the questions is the sheer number. We're talking dozens of questions. So it's not just a question of having just 3 or 4 queries that they want to knock out and be done with. This is pretty in-depth, and I would say that it covers such a broad gamut of campaign, transition, and presidential issues, and that I think is notable and striking. One thing that is not surprising is that most of the questioning seems to be dedicated to the question of, did the president obstruct justice when he fired Director Comey, when he sought to pressure Jeff Sessions, his attorney general, not to recuse? So we do see a lot of focus on obstruction, but there's clearly still an interest from the president, from Mueller, in trying to understand what the president knew about any sort of contacts anyone in his campaign was having with Russia. And obviously, everything about this investigation is unusual, including the appointment of a special counsel, because that's not something that happens a lot in American history. So there's not that much of a template for that, and certainly there's not been many situations in which the president himself falls under investigation. So we are in sort of uncharted territories, but there's nothing that precludes or is extraordinary about a government investigator telling a potential subject, here's the evidence and information we've gleaned. Before we close out this investigation, we need to understand your perspective on this. And one thing that's really important about this investigation is so much comes down to state of mind and intent, so that the actions themselves may not be criminal. But what Special Counsel Mueller is really trying to do is figure out what was in the president's head when he committed certain acts. So when he fired Jim Comey, which is an act that in theory should be 100% perfectly legal, did he do that with a corrupt intent, which would be to stymie the Russia investigation? That is the million-dollar question of what would happen if he refuses. One thing that Mueller could theoretically do is seek a grand jury subpoena that would try to compel the president's testimony. That's a very incredible, aggressive, extraordinary move to try to subpoena and compel the testimony of a sitting president. Obviously, President Clinton was subpoenaed when he was in office during the Whitewater investigation, so there is a precedent for it. That was an independent counsel. I think it will really depend on how much Mueller really feels he needs these statements. It is possible he could say, you know what, I have a lot of information without your statements, and I'm ready to move forward whether you speak to me or not. So we don't really know.